with the big faces.
I love listening to it.
Kane Sims.
Kane Sims, the one and only.
Britain's finest, Mr. Kane Sims.
Dustin Coates.
I like it when you guys are together and talking about voice.
Without further ado, welcome to the show.
All right. Hey, here we are. How do?
Is it Thursday already?
It's Thursday already. Would you believe that?
Man.
It is well and truly Thursday, and we're rolling strong into the weekend, and we have got a fantastic guest lined up today in Justin Randall. Justin, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me. I'm honored and humbled and for being here. Your podcast has been an excellent frame of reference for me as I've been working through, building our sort of smart IVR virtual assistant for our call center. So thank you very much for doing this.
No problem at all. I'm just posting the link to the LinkedIn event in case it doesn't show up in the event. But yeah, no, welcome and thanks for joining us. How's things baby-wise, Justin? You've had a intense couple of days.
Yeah. I was telling Kane just before the call that my wife has gone back to work, so I'm all alone with the baby from about 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. And yesterday definitely kicked my butt. The baby missed her mom for sure, but today by the end I was like, I could do this. Like I can do this. I gave her a bath by myself. I was like getting laundry done. I was like, this is quite nice. We'll see how tomorrow goes though.
Nice. That's good. A few things before we kick off. So today, welcome for everyone joining us. If it's the first time you've tuned in, this is VUX World. Welcome. And this is the podcast where we talk about practical voice AI and conversational AI strategy implementation. Strategy, design, development, the whole 9 yards. And today, Justin is going to walk us through how he created and implemented a bot, an automated agent in the contact center for Comwave using DialogFlow. We're going to walk through the whole process and we're going to get Justin's experience and insights for doing this for the very first time. But before we kick off, a couple of things. One thing, Dustin, I don't know whether you noticed it, but I think I might be able to join you and call myself a published author.
I saw that. Congrats, man.
Yeah. How cool is that?
Congratulations.
Yeah. So a little bit of backstory. What happened is a while back, I was asked to do an article for Harvard Business Review, and it was all about the future. Well, it was about voice AI, and I chose the future of voice shopping, basically, because it was something I was particularly into at the time. Wrote this article for Harvard Business Review. It was published on the site, all that kind of stuff. And then I got a message the other day from someone saying, wanted to connect, seeing your article in the Year in Tech 2021. I thought, that's interesting. What's that? And he sent me a couple of pictures. Turns out that Harvard Business Review publish about 6 or 7 different books every year. This one is the tech one for 2021. And I'll quote Dustin. It says, a year of Harvard Business Review's essential thinking on tech. All right. And when you look inside, you've got, this sounds very self-congratulatory, but it was a very big surprise, and I am very pleased with it. Inside, you've got basically an intro, around what this book is all about. And the very first article that you will come across is How Voice Assistants Could Change the Way We Shop, written by yours truly.
Congratulations.
How fantastic is that? So I don't think I can quite call myself a published author in the same vein as you, Dustin, because it is an article I wrote of mine, and you've wrote an entire book. But take it where you can get it, don't you?
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Where can we pick up one of those books?
Amazon, I believe. Maybe we'll put a link in the show notes. It's only, I don't know, $20 or something like that. 12 quid in the UK. I haven't read the whole thing yet. I only turned up today. But there you go. Over the moon. Anyway, moving on. Enough about the self-congratulatory boasting. Moving on. So, Justin, welcome. Welcome to the show. As we said, very, very glad to have you along. And tell us a bit about yourself and about what you do at Comwave. So you're the Chief Innovation Officer at Comwave. Tell us a little bit about what that role entails and a little bit about Comwave as well for those that are not based in Canada or who might not be familiar.
Absolutely, yeah. So I'll start with Comwave in that case. So I mean, we're one of the largest independent telecommunications providers in Canada. So we offer, and we're probably most well known for our residential offerings of like internet, home phone, TV. But we're also very focused on B2B, providing managed internet, managed network security, and products of that sort. We also, probably lesser known about us, we have a very large wholesale VoIP network where we also provide, whether it's Canadian or international, voice termination to both national carriers and some carriers around the globe. So my role, of course, I currently hold the title of Chief Innovation Officer, but I've been with the company for quite some time. So I started around 2006, where we were working in what is now a small, furniture warehouse. So this is back in the time where I could stand up and sort of do a quick turn of the head and see the entire, 15 people, that were working for the company. And, today, including agents, we're about, 500 employees. Again, we cover, a very, very large footprint in Canada. And we've been able to achieve a lot of these great things, in part from, of course, great business decisions, but also on the technology side through lots of automation. So automation has been part of what I've been responsible for from the get-go. When I showed up, it was kind of funny. I came from a much bigger, service provider before arriving at Comwave, and I took on a role as voice engineer, and showed up at my first day of work going, cool. Where's the rest of the engineering team? And my boss was like, oh, yeah, it's you, right? So it's like, oh. And suddenly, I had to think about building data centers, network engineering, systems architectures, and software development outside of, let's say, CRM and customer-facing web pages. So it's actually very excited, again, to be on this podcast. A lot of the software projects that I work on are not necessarily things that are customer-facing or even necessarily that publicly interesting. So it was very cool to work on Penny or Virtual Agent or Smart IVR or VoiceBot, whatever you want to call these things, and be able to share my story.
And what does Penny do?
Yeah, that's a great question. So Penny, and this is, I'll sort of tie this into one of the reasons why you probably should or shouldn't consider this. Penny is an IVR replacement, right? So you hear virtual agent, you see, Google Duplex and, that reservation booking. And I think a lot of people think, oh, this is going to replace, call center agents. Well, it's definitely not that, in my mind. This is about replacing the IVR, right? So you think about, traditional phone systems, you call in, please, listen carefully, our options have changed. Maybe you've got a language selector as your first prompt. Then you've got some, tiered, ultimately you're trying to get to the point where you're going to transfer someone to the right person, right? And that's where, some of the advancements in speech recognition and all that can really provide value. Instead of, forcing someone to listen to who knows how long of a prompt, sort of to hear all the different tiered menu options and finally get to someone, Penny is there so that you can describe your problem using natural language, of course, and there may be some follow-up prompts, but the idea, like where I see Penny as a great success, is if someone can just say one, clear sentence, and Penny, oh, okay, you know what? Just confirming this is what you're calling about. Okay, awesome. Let me help you. And of course, one of the secondary benefits of that is if there is a skill that Penny can take care of, then perhaps we can also get first call resolution. I mean, if you think about IVRs, there's nothing new about IVRs that are doing actions on behalf of customers. I mean, even in the DTMF IVRs, you've got things like make a payment, check account balance, and all sorts of different things that many companies have been doing for years. But it's all about simplifying or reducing the friction for the customer that it takes to get to those stages. And beyond that, sorry to expand, shortening the call duration time itself. So if you think about the tools that might be available to your agents, sorry, I'm going to
stop you there. I think we've got a bit of an issue. Basically Chrome crashed and I've restarted it and it's still telling me it's live, but the comments on YouTube and the comments on LinkedIn say it's not working.
Okay. Hey, Kane, I added a link that works.
Oh, is there another link that works?
Yeah, there's another link that works. So if you're listening to us, you found the link that works. If you're not listening to us, you're probably at the link that doesn't work. But I added that in the YouTube comments, so hopefully we get some people.
Fantastic. I will put that on LinkedIn. What happened basically was Chrome crashed, and basically things went pear-shaped there. But I can't see your comment, Dustin. Can you paste it in this chat, please? Because there's people asking. Oh no, it's live on LinkedIn. This is very weird. It's live on LinkedIn now by the looks of things.
Sweet.
Yeah, so we're all good on YouTube. We're all good on LinkedIn. We're just not on the original link on YouTube.
Right.
So I just shared that with you.
Got
Okay,
it.
that's fair enough. This is the work. Right, fair enough. Okay, fine. Thanks for that, Justin. Cool. Right. Apologies.
No, that's
Apologies,
okay.
Justin. Yeah, Chrome crashed, so I missed a bit of it. And then anyway, well, let's rerun that again. So we were in the process of talking about considerations that Penny isn't necessarily a replacement for agents. It's not gonna. That's not the point. The aim is to essentially replace the IVR. That's kind
right.
of the train of thought.
Right, and then some of the secondary benefits behind that, of course, are reduced call hold time. So if you think about, even the role an agent has to play today, they might take the call, they're handling the customer's request. If you've got a great system in place, maybe they don't need to log into multiple systems. Chances are maybe the agent might have to go into different systems to fulfill the customer's request. Maybe it's to look up information, so on and so forth. Well, one of the things that, of course, that you can do this with DTMF IVRs as well as virtual agents, you can actually pull and aggregate a whole bunch of that data before the agent even receives the call. So rather than receiving a call and trying to get, hey, how may I help you? There's already a very, synthesized summary of not only the reason for the call, but maybe even some steps that you can take or some steps that may have already been taken to try and help the customer's request or even shorten the call. One of the very quick things, again, we're an internet provider, right? So of course, when people call in and, they're having something with their internet, what's the first thing that we're going to tell people? Did you turn it off and on again, right? So believe it or not, there's a lot of people that still don't do that. Right. So you think, we've already achieved, a 1% first call resolution just on asking people to turn it on, off and on again. Right. Which is essentially allowed Penny to pay for herself. Right. Mm-hmm. And then, but beyond that, once an agent takes a call, their previous steps would have been walking through the customer, turning it off and on again. So if you think, we recommend, unplugging it for a few minutes, plugging it back in, waiting, 5-7 minutes, that's call hold time right there. Right. So being able to do that before the call already goes to an agent is already a big savings.
Interesting. Yeah. So how many kind of use cases does Penny do at the moment then? What's the scope of what Penny does right now?
Absolutely. So Penny really handles technical support tickets and billing disputes. We have a lot of features in the funnel in our pre-production environment right now. We have a release planned in February where we are going to augment the skills quite a bit. But right now it's focused on billing disputes and technical support. And we wanted to do it that way also to be able to get Penny out the door to make Penny successful. Because if we had sat there and we had planned, here's all of the use cases we would love Penny to be able to handle ahead of time, we'd probably still be coding for another year and a half. Right. So it was very much about how can we create, very focused benefits from Penny very early. If you call our IVR right now, the first prompt, is still actually a DTMF IVR. This is, to check your balance or make a payment, push 1 for customer service, 2, so on and so forth. So if you do, push 2 for customer service, push 4 for technical support, you will reach Penny. Right. And at that point, you can speak naturally. Penny should be able to identify even things that Penny can't do anything about. Penny should still pick up on those words and get you routed to the right department.
So it sounds then like you're taking an iterative approach. Is that right?
That's correct. Absolutely. Small successes, small short success cycles, rather than deploying it in one big shot and dealing with the chaos.
Mm. And how do you determine then? I guess I'm essentially asking you, how do you determine what's on your roadmap? How do you determine what are those small successes that you then move on and graduate to the big leagues?
Absolutely. So, it's always good to start with use cases that are, like in my case, familiar to me, but also that represent a decent amount of call volume. So, of course, we've operated a call center for decades, right? So we know what our call drivers are. We can go to our call center and say, hey, what's our top 3, call drivers, per department. So focusing on those and what can we do to help those. But in our case, it was a little bit different. We had a very unfortunate situation, fall onto us, which was the sudden closure of our outsourced call center due to a positive screening of COVID. Right. So in a building that had thousands of agents, we maybe had a few hundred agents working there. We just got a call one morning that said hey, building's closed. You don't have a call center. So we're like, wait, what? Hold on, what? So we very quickly scrambled, of course, right? And a lot of customer service functions, or I shouldn't say a lot, but we had reasonable customer service functions online, like on our web page and things like that. But where people were the most upset was in technical support. So you imagine, as a telecommunications provider, I mean, people look at us and they say, oh, they sell internet, they sell phone, they sell TV, and they're not wrong. But in truth is, we're not like, people don't actively seek to buy internet. People don't seek to buy home phone or buy TV. What they're looking for is a way to connect to their social media. They want a way to watch their favorite. They want entertainment. They want to connect with family. They want to do things that are meaningful to them. So when these things don't work, people are mad, right? Now, of course, when you're upset, like how many people today would, if your internet was down, would simply send a gently worded email to their service provider and patiently wait a few days, for them to get back to you? Absolutely not, right? You're going to pick up the phone and you're going to call, right? Because you need your internet working. And then what do you do if no one can answer the phone, right? So one of the first things we did, and actually I should rewind a bit, like I never had more customers look me up on LinkedIn and treat me personally as a service channel for Comwave than in those first early months. And it's I don't blame them, right? Because when you've got the customer base that we have in terms of size, like, I mean, we're not ignoring a small amount of calls when our call center is closed. And so the need to be able to field technical issues was very critical. Now, I was lucky myself that my first job in telecommunications was a tech support agent, right? So I did internet support, I did phone support, not TV at the time, but so I was very familiar with the lexicon used, how customers talked about things. We had a lot of existing tickets, whether it's from the web or call recordings from past voice things. So I was in a good position to be able to take my own experience as a software developer and a VoIP engineer, and be able to sort of hobble my way through, putting something together. The first thing we did was DTMF, based. So, hey, if it's a problem with your internet, push 1, push 2, push 3. Those were there before, but they were just a route to a department. In this case, the difference was we were kicking off a ticket, right? So we were actually creating that service request and giving the number. And then, we quickly sort of assembled a small, well, as big as a team as we could, which was a small call center team at such short notice, to at least do outbound callbacks. And so very quickly we found our customers stopped screaming as much, and they were happier being able to call and issue that ticket, right? And of course, fast forward to today, in between there, we realized, how are we going to quantify all the different types of issues, right? Like we can't just say blanket, internet, home phone, TV, right? There's of course many different types of issues. Is it a speed issue? Are you down? And we, to be honest, we obviously have to prioritize customers who are down versus a customer that said, last night my Netflix was buffering, but everything else it's okay. But how do we even get that Netflix is buffering on the DTMF IVR? Right? Are you going to program keys for all possible streaming services or online games or you name it? It's wild, right? And imagine a customer listening to all those options, right? You'll have to have double or triple digit DTMF entries at that point. And so that's where natural language became the way, right? How do we just let people describe their problem, scrape as much information as we can? We're scraping things like, even if you mention a family member, well, I'm really sorry it affected your time with your family. Because remember, people are consuming telecommunication services to do things like work from home or, talk to family or enjoy entertainment. So it's important to empathize for the use case for the customer, right? And then there's a whole bunch of other little bits like what's your modem color lights? Is it a problem calling a specific country, city? And we're not forcing anybody to give us those details, right? Because that would also make the process of a virtual agent fairly arduous. You're still going to have to answer tons of questions, but Penny is set up to detect a significant number of entities from the problem description and categorize them, but then keep the confirmations fairly simple. And if it's something Penny can help with, great. Otherwise, get you to an agent as soon as possible.
Cool. Just checking this is still running because my Chrome crashed again. It's an absolute nightmare. This. If it is running, can someone just please drop a comment on the in the chat? And John, I know you put a question in there for Justin, which we'll get to around decision trees and things like that, and whether that's the best approach. But before then, it sounds as though Penny does a hell of a lot. Although it might be we're good. Thank you, Ash. That's good. And although it might be, specific to support tickets and things like that, it still sounds as though there's a very broad scope. So, and then some call centers, or most call centers, have that data. Some don't, in terms of like figuring out what people are calling for, what's coming in, and then figuring out what you should kind of, what use cases you should prioritize. Is that where it started for you? Is that what your first steps were? Is looking at what's coming in, understanding what the use cases are, prioritizing those based on like either volume or complexity or something like that? Was that like your beginning steps to do this?
Absolutely, yeah. Beyond the immediate need for having tech support accessible by phone in some way, yes, absolutely. And so even like the features that are coming in February, they're all based on a priority list of high volume call drivers, right? So the more things that we can try and help the customer with, or the more things that we can try and prepare our agents who are receiving the call with more information, the better. The other, I guess, the side benefit once you get to NLU, and again, you can do this in the IVR as well, but with NLU, you can extract more information, is you have a better visibility of your call drivers before they're answered, right? So if you think of sort of the traditional call center model, you've got an IVR, you've got options, whatever you're forcing your customer to go through as far as a gauntlet of options, you can catalog that and you can say, hey, I just received calls where customers dialed option 1, 2, 3, and 4, and that means that it's this problem. But of course, with natural language, you can extract a lot more of that. And suddenly, whereas in the past, your agent would say, hey, or agents would group together and say, you know what, we're starting to get a higher call volume of a very specific subtle type of issue, right? Well, now Penny can actually pick that up. Like if you have the right dashboards and visualizations, you can see very detailed, potentially, what your call drivers are before the call's even completed.
And so you mentioned that in the past, you'd have the service agents come together and, whether it's over the water cooler and meetings or whatever, and discuss those trends that they were seeing. Who's reviewing that now?
You're talking about like with Penny or with the existing call center?
With Penny, with those transcripts that are coming in.
Absolutely. So we have some automation set in place to trigger alerts, right? Based on, variances of average numbers of cases with certain bits, about them. So then it'll be an automatic notification like, hey, we've seen a spike, of this thing occurring. But then obviously the existing processes of, people noticing it is still a case. But one of the things I'm very proud of, like we did have, a small issue caused by a software upgrade recently that affected, I think, 0.5% of people, or 0.5% of calls of a particular service, right? And usually to try and catch that, and intermittently even for that 0.5%. So normally to catch those types of issues, your traditional monitoring systems that are looking for macro problems are not going to notice that as well. You'd almost have to rely on customer reports for something that intermittent to eventually get there. Like you think 0.5%, we can make 100 test calls and not reproduce it. Right. And so, Penny has successfully been able to identify some of those and notify us of problems before, the pulse hits our agents, and the issue's been experienced for a lot longer than it needs to be.
And then Glen Ritchie on LinkedIn has a question that I think ties really well into this, which is, what are the KPIs are you looking at to measure success?
Yeah, that's great. That's a very good question. So you're obviously going to want to look at abandon rate. It's one of the big ones, right? So if you have an IVR and people are hanging up on it, you obviously want to know, but you also want to know where. So your KPIs should be contextual, right? It shouldn't just be a matter of hung up. Okay, people hang up. Maybe they fixed their problem before they got through, right? You want to know where they're hanging up. You want to keep track of fallbacks, of course, right? So fallbacks, just to be clear, like when you're talking about NLU and you're within a specific context, you may have certain follow-up intents that are very specific to where you are in the conversation. But of course, if nothing matches, you go to the fallback. So keeping track of where your customers are hanging up, where you're triggering a lot of fallbacks, but even being able to drill down on those fallbacks. And this is one of the reasons that led me to DialogFlow as well, as through the reading that I had done at the time before I embarked on my journey, I noticed a few people in writing mentioned that, Amazon doesn't give you the query text, for fallback. They just give you the resolved intent. And so that's obviously, very, very difficult to troubleshoot and improve if you don't know what the ASR kind of initially thought it was before taking that ASR and mapping it to an intent. So, we have very rich dashboards that'll break down percentage-wise of fallback intent. So you may have forgotten, an important piece of language or an important way customers may describe something, and being able to say, hey, you know what? There's a larger amount of fallback intents at that specific context. Let's click and drill down and see what's there. Oh, you know what? Customers, in the speak to an agent prompt are actually saying a representative, and you know what? There's actually 20% of fallbacks are because someone's saying representative. Well, let me go into these intents now and map representative in addition to agent, and now suddenly that 20% is gone, and you refine yourself down to the point where where you don't have a sizable portion of fallbacks. Beyond that, obviously, you're going to want to capture metrics specific to your call center, right? So depending on the product that you're offering, or in our case, in a support scenario, what are the the sub issues? For billing disputes, you may want to know how many customers are triggering billing disputes, how many disputes your agent is able to handle, how many they were not able to handle, if the agent was or if Penny was or wasn't able to handle, how many people still decide to talk to an agent afterwards. There's an immense amount of KPIs that we're monitoring today.
You were talking about the refinements. I guess the question is, at this point, now that you've been doing this for a while, how much time are you spending on refinements on a weekly or monthly basis? And is that you who's doing it, or do you have a specific profile who's going in and refining the language model?
Yeah, so that's a fair point. So I'm going to be completely honest, it's me right now. But I've already started the process of training different teams. So Penny came to be as a pet project of mine, and so of course, when I'm getting all these LinkedIn messages, and I genuinely feel for customers who are having these problems, and coupled with the pandemic and not being able to go out or really have a social life. I decided, what, I'm going to do something about this. And so, I bought 4 books, including yours, Dustin, very good book, on learning, NLP and conversational AIs. At first I was very interested in also approaching the assistant, like the Google Assistant and Amazon. But, for us, remember, I need something that's a lowest common denominator service channel for people to call in. So one day I would love for people to be able to say Google Assistant, like, hey, put me in touch with Comwave and talk that way. But at least for us, it was very clear the lowest common denominator service channel was voice.
That's actually perfect timing, because Heidi Cohen on YouTube just asked a similar question. I see Kane's got it all lined up as well. What other books and materials did you read that influenced your thinking and maybe trained you up to be able to build this? Absolutely.
So the one that really got me started was, I think it was Building Cognitive Virtual Assistants with Google DialogFlow. Right. It was a how-to book. I'm not usually a big how-to book reader. I like a lot more theoretical design type references, but I needed to get something done. Right. So I bought a few different books. I can pull them out right here. So we have, of course, your book, Dustin, Voice Applications for Alexa and Google Assistant, Designing Voice User Interfaces by Kathy Pearl, Designing Bots by Amir Shavat. And hold
them up, Justin, so people can see the.
Oh, sure. I apologize. So, Designing Voice User Interfaces, Kathy Pearl.
Classic.
Yeah. Designing Bots, Amir Shavat.
Mm-hmm. Nice.
I hope I pronounced that correctly. Voice Applications.
It's a good looking book.
Google Assistant. Yeah, exactly.
It's the Bible. Huh?
And I keep really good ongoing reference books in this shelf. The Building Cognitive Virtual Assistants with Google DialogFlow being a how-to book, unfortunately, doesn't make a place on my shelf. So it's in another bookshelf somewhere else in the house. But I believe it's by A Press as the publisher for that one.
Cool. Well, we may as well crack on with the questions, because people have got some decent questions. And John, I know you put a question in here, and Chrome has since crashed and reopened, so if I do mess this up, please feel free to repost it on LinkedIn. John was asking about the approach to designing the conversational AI. So the IVR that you mentioned that you started out with, the DTMF is the press 1 for this, press 2 for that. That tends to be very much a tree-based narrative and a tree-based structure. Some people approach designing conversations with a tree-based structure. Justin, we've covered plenty of times before around why that might be such a good idea. So what was your approach to doing this? Did you go with more of a tree-based structure, or did you go with more kind of just letting the user say something and you try and catch the intent, and then you walk them through whatever that conversation looks like?
Yeah, that's a very, very important design point. So I definitely started with a tree structure because, again, a traditional telco background, right? I know IVRs, right? So I took IVRs and I started building an IVR in DialogFlow, and it was great for a proof of concept, right? So that was fantastic because I could do the entire thing in DialogFlow at that point, sort of building out all the intents in a tree structure. I hooked in Dialog Phone Gateway without worrying about how to hook it into our existing telephony infrastructure. I just had mocks. I didn't bother setting up webhooks at first. Ultimately, I wanted to put together something to show my CEO and my CTO and go, look, this is really cool and we can do this, right? And so I built it as a tree structure. And very quickly, when I realized I had to start making changes, particularly doing the tree structure in DialogFlow, that became a big problem, right? And maintaining the tree. Sorry?
Why was that?
Well, there's a lot of things that you want to say, like let's talk about follow-up intents that might be contextually relevant, right? Like even the case of like a fallback intent as an example. Like if someone says the wrong thing in one context, you want to steer them in the right direction. Like you want to take those conversational turns and kind of help people in the right direction. So a fallback in one, context might be completely different in another. So you end up having to repeat an immense amount of intents, right? Because it's not just fallbacks, it's things like repeat, it's things like previous, it's things like speak to an agent. There's a whole plethora of different follow-up intents, and having to repeat those over and over and over again for every context in a tree that you've mapped becomes very cumbersome very quickly, right? And so, the approach, of course, in the end was sort of decouple the tree into many, let's call them 2-layer shrubs, right? Where you've got like one context and then it's follow-up intents, and that's it. And then your code, of course, is sort of what glues all of that together.
That's a new that could be a new methodology. That the two shrub approach.
Yeah, the 2-layer shrub. Two-tier shrub.
2-tier shrub. Classic.
And then there was another question. There's a question that we really want to get to, which is actually it's exactly the same question that is relevant here. A lot of teams that we've spoken with. It sounds like you're very agile and this is largely a one-man show at the time, but a lot of the teams that we speak with, you might have a team that is responsible for the technical content, and then you've got a team who's responsible for the customer service, and you've got a team that's responsible for the bot and the IVR. So how fast can you change and deploy, and how do you stay agile?
Absolutely. So part of being successful with this, remember, like Penny is an abstraction of many different, technological successes that we've had at Comwave over the years, right? So you're going to need obviously a very mature software development pipeline, right? So we have our own, private bare metal Kubernetes clusters. We're doing serverless microservices for every single one of Penny's skills. Like all the APIs that we talk to are using open APIs. So we've got like even easy, visual, testing pages to make sure that things are good. You're going to want to make sure you have automated testing, automated, load testing. And so we're very lucky to have a lot of that before we even began this. So when it came down to actually putting together Penny, probably the bigger learning curve was actually learning the domain-specific language for the voice application used to control the call, right? So you have Google, of course, as the NLU, which you can build a tree in Google, but at that point you're kind of forcing a linear conversation where conversational AIs are, to me, by nature, shouldn't really be linear. It should be open, right? But ultimately, there is some language there is some element of control that you need to have over the call. Like what is the conversation vector that you're on, right? So here's what I think we're doing now. Here's all this code to make sure that we trigger the right forms of the right 2-tier shrubs, in DialogFlow, and maintain conversational state so that when you say back, it goes to the right place instead of the wrong one. So, and what I mean by that, imagine you have something like an internet problem or a phone problem, you may have some parameters in your intent to match those that are conditionally optional, right? So you, of course, you may want to have one required problem that is, or one required parameter that is, what is the problem? But based on that problem, there may be a few other points that you want to gather. Now, if you have just one entity, there's no way today that you're going to enforce those conditional parameters. So you need to make everything optional. You need to exit. And then at that point, you have, again, the nice two-tier shrubs to kind of prompt for the subsequent parameters that you need. But then you need to handle back properly. I mean, if I again, sorry, I'm talking circularly here. If I go back to that one entity with all these parameters, even if I made them all required and I figured out a way to do that, if I say back while I'm in an intent and I'm somewhere deeper in gathering a subsequent, required parameter, I'm not going to back up the parameter. I'm going to go back to the previous intent, right? So breaking apart those things and having ultimate control of the conversation itself. For us, that's done, in this domain-specific language that's outside of DialogFlow.
I want to go back really quickly,
Sure.
if you don't mind, to you talked about the automated testing, and we talked, people in general talk a lot about building, which I understand it's exciting, it's sexy, but you want to make sure it doesn't break. So I'm assuming that you've got some unit tests in there, but can you talk a little bit more about what that testing setup looks like, and are you also testing whether someone actually saying something, their voice, the audio is getting to the right place as well? Absolutely,
yeah. So of course, the easiest tests to get done are those low-level unit tests. So as we're writing code that does various things, whether it's a backend API or things like that, it's important to test your classes, to test your various different, objects that you're using to ultimately provide this API service. You want to test the API externally, right? So this is where, in our build pipeline, we might launch something like JMeter, right, and start hammering the APIs and do full contract end-to-end testing. You're going to want to, monitor performance on your backend systems too, right? So when we're talking to a database, we've got other systems that are monitoring the query performance for each individual table. So we can see if all of a sudden, data gets to a certain point where now, hey, queries are starting to ramp up. We know we need to maybe partition tables or adjust indexes or doing something like that. But when you get to the actual voice testing, you obviously need people involved. Like, I mean, I'm sure there's companies that say we can, do automated testing of your IVRs and stuff like that. And that's great. And I'm sure it works. For us, we're a small company. We weren't in the position where we were going to go, hey, let's contract this, company to do all this testing for us. We relied on our internal staff. So, at first, of course it was me, doing some of this testing. But then once we got to a point where we did a pilot launch, I got permission to email as many people as I could throughout the organization, which was close to 40-ish people. Very diverse, right, group, which was good. And everyone I gave them a list of topics like, hey, try and open up a ticket for this. Try and, without guiding them to tell the language, like, hey, say this, because of course that's not what you want. You want people to say it in their own way. So open a ticket for this, open a ticket for this, do the following things, and then note the result. And then, of course, afterwards, I went through all of it, right? So Google does have, what should I call it? The training console, which will actually show you what people have said, what intent it was mapped with. And then that's when you discover, that accents and even just an inflection on your tongue at that particular moment in time will result in detecting things that aren't, recognizable. And so at that point, it was interesting. Like, the strategy that we took is, well, we figured we can actually augment the entities for a lot of those words that are confusing. And remember, Google will actually use your entities to help guide the speech recognition. So if you can take some of those difficult words where accents do result in some groups being able to trigger more successfully than another, take those failed cases and loop them in under the same entity. And by recognizing those, one of the examples, of course, that we run into is someone saying, I want to speak to an agent. Of course, it came up to DialogFlow detected it as I want to speak to an Asian, right? So the key is agent, entity, map this as another possibility for that. So that way, at least, we're triggering the right intent, and we're doing something to compensate for accents. And of course, different wordings and stuff like that, you would just add them into the training data of the intents themselves.
Are there any regional Canadian accents that are harder than others?
I mean, it's funny. Like I even triggered funny stuff, speaking English to DialogFlow. So I don't even know if it's specific to accents or even just the fact that there was some odd ambient noise, in the background that somehow, when being processed by the ASR influenced, the detection of my speech. But yeah, I mean, of course, in Canada, like if you go from east to west coast, there are absolutely different regional accents.
I want to get through some of these questions here. There's a guy, Andrew Francis. Apologies for not getting around to it till a bit later. He's posted it twice, so I definitely want to get to this one. So you've spoke about using DialogFlow. You spoke about why you chose DialogFlow. You spoke a lot about what's sitting behind DialogFlow. How did you actually make the integration? And from the conversation so far, this question from, and it says LinkedIn user here, it's from Andrew Francis. So he's asking, are you using the DialogFlow telephone gateway to make this integration, or have you done something more specific to integrate into your contact center?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I use the telephone gateway for a proof of concept, but it is not, I mean, hopefully no one hates me for saying this, but it is not suitable for production in my opinion, right? Because when you're dealing with, a call center, right? Because let's remember what we're trying to do here. At least in our use case, we're talking about a call center, right? So you don't want to drop your customers' calls. You want to ultimately maintain control of the call, right? And so, when you've got, your entire, phone, everything going to DialogFlow, what happens if your call drops? Where does it go there, right? And let's not pretend that, the big tech giants don't have errors. I mean, we had a problem, I'll give you an example, like last week, where a certain giant, tech company was having a massive outage every day at 9 a.m. I think it was because of the sudden spike of the classroom service that they're offering, right? But in our case, our calls didn't drop because our call controller is outside of DialogFlow. So of course we had tons of DialogFlow API failures at that time. But again, if your application is outside of DialogFlow, which ours is, we can actually maintain that call state. And this is one of the advantages that telecoms have also in offering this is like we run our own phone network. Like if you think about it, we are your gatekeepers to the internet, to the cloud, to the PSTN, right? So we're situated in probably the most perfect place to offer these virtual agents servers. I mean, we have direct fiber between our data center and Google's data centers in the same building, right? As well as full access to a large SS7 network footprint. And again, if you think about support, let's say you do have a call drop. Are you calling Google and saying, I want you to figure out what carrier and who's responsible for that drop call, right? When it comes to telecom, it's already a fiercely competitive market, which means that there's a certain baseline expectations of product quality and product support. So yeah, I mean, it's already baked into our way of business. If you've got call issues or whatnot, yeah, we'll figure that out. We'll actually work with carriers. We'll figure out who's at fault. And in the case of DialogFlow, it gives us an advantage of resiliency, right? So in those cases at 9 a.m., of course, when all those calls were failing because such and such was having capacity problems or whatever it may have been, the behavior for our customers was sort of a silence for a few seconds, and then flipping back into our DTMF version of the IVR that runs solely in our telephony platform and lets the customers get through. Mm-hmm. Right. So our solution is it's obviously we have a whole bunch of commercial partners that we ultimately when assembled together make what I'll call the Comwave media server, right? And on these Comwave media servers, it's essentially using the Google gRPC v2 API for streaming.
Mm-hmm. Nice. I'm just debating which one we take next. There is so many questions coming through. The discussion is so lively. We did have a bit of an outline for this discussion, but I mean, it seems as though people have quite a lot of questions, and so we can pick some more of these up if you're happy. And I don't know whether we'll get through them all, but we can certainly try. So this is more of a technical question, which is maybe in some way related to your previous question. You might have to define some of these terms for people who are not from the contact center space. But Deymi says sometimes different TFNs, I don't know what that stands for. What's that stand for, TFN?
Toll-free numbers.
Toll-free numbers, cool. Need different configurations when going through an IVR, depending on the business lines. Does your platform or does what you've created have an interface to manage these configurations, or is that not been an issue?
Absolutely, yeah. So we, of course, again, telecommunications company, we're actually using the most advanced business, telephony or unified communications platform in the world. And so like we essentially map subscribers and subscriber numbers through that platform directly into voice, our voice applications, right? So we've even templatized Penny, for example. Penny didn't start out as Penny. Penny actually had a different name and a different voice at first, but we templatized it even within this system so that we could take any number and map it to voice application ABC, or in this case, like a call center agent, right? And pass an array of parameters that could influence, name, what TTS voice we're using, and all that sort of stuff. What phone numbers are going to be triggered based off of different numbers, and so on and so forth.
Cool, nice one. What about persona? So your design approach to creating Penny, you've called it Penny. Is it a her? Is it an it? And Georgios asks, any persona design, did you actually do conscious persona design, or did you just use whatever the voice came from Google Assistant and try and piggyback on the kind of more bland persona that Google Assistant might have?
Yeah, so it's a very good question. So one of the things I hope to eventually get to is also branded personas, right? But of course, that would have required considerable amount of more time. And right now, it's about adding functionality and reducing effort for our customers before getting to the point of doing all that persona branding. But yeah, so a lot of the dialogue was done. I would say the first pass was me just writing things down, right, and then working with business leaders in marketing to kind of curb a few things, but they definitely allowed some leeway with some of the small talk options and some of the banter. So it's an area that I would say we still need to revisit and build out, because again, like I mentioned, I would love to have adaptable personas. Like if you look at if you read books on customer experience, you'll find that different people calling about different issues will have different we'll expect different styles of interaction, right? Like, if someone's calling because they feel that, you've ripped them off on their bill, do you really want your agent to be all happy and bubbly and cheerful? You probably want to be a little bit more serious and professional, right? So right now, Penny has, I would say, a generally positive demeanor. I try, you can joke around with Penny a little bit to an extent. There's a couple Easter eggs there, but eventually, yes, I would like to react a little bit better and say, again, if I know a customer's fuming, change the tone a little bit and be a little bit more adaptive.
And we've got a question now from Michael Nelson. Can you share how calls are eventually routed to live agents?
Yeah, absolutely. So at the end of the day, a call center is a call center. You've got queues. Maybe you've got different priorities of queues for all sorts of different purposes. So when a call actually goes to a queue within our voice application or voice program or whatever, we're transferring the calls, right? So we have, and again, this is part of the input parameters, so we can even change those destination numbers based on the incoming number. But yeah, so once we've determined where the call should go, that call ultimately transfers to a queue whereby the agents are subscribed to that queue. Now, again, we're a telecommunications provider. We've been selling call center, like voice-based call centers, for years. So we, as this expression goes, we eat our own dog food, right? So we are using the same call center product that we sell to our businesses, right? So it's great. Like, I mean, obviously, there's a future product in Penny in my eyes. There's obviously a few things that we need to do to take it where it wants to be, but the goal is to be able to offer standalone virtual agents and smart IVRs. Maybe you already have a call center product that you enjoy, but also, hey, if you want the whole thing, we can do that too.
Interesting. So what is there's a question here around chat. We've been talking about IVRs quite a lot. This is from JUSFC. I imagine Penny right now is IVR. Is there any potential, do you see, in extending Penny to other channels? Is that something that you've considered?
Of course, absolutely. I mean, again, like you want to be able to offer the service channel that your customer prefers or that your customers prefer. So, whether it's chat, whether it's email, whether it's submitting web requests that wind up in an email. But what we've found, and especially when we lost our call center, is when it comes to the lowest common denominator, and when it comes to the reasons why people call us, right? Because remember, again, we're talking about people call us because they're not able to watch Netflix, or they're not able to, call their family member overseas, or, so it's, sorry, it's, I apologize. I lost. So do you mind refreshing me there for a second?
Yeah. So we're talking about potentially extending Penny into other channels beyond IVR.
I apologize. Yeah. So there's a sense of immediacy, and chat can be relatively immediate, but for us the main focus is on building out the voice channel and making it perfect. Like, I am by no means claiming that Penny is perfect right now. There's still room for improvement. Penny is absolutely a success in the goals that we sought out to do. But again, one of the benefits also of building out your voice channel first, it's kind of, a good way to assess the performance of your other channels, isn't it? Right? Because if you've got chat, or you've got email, or you've got web, and things are going wrong and people aren't getting, what they want, or they're getting frustrated, I know for me, I call, right? So by taking that call and really building that out, like someone may even utter, I tried to use your chat bot, and I couldn't do it. They may say that to your virtual agent, right? And being able to pick up on that, or even being able to pick up, like, maybe you launched a new chatbot and suddenly you see a spike of increased calls, right? Because people tried to use it and found it confusing, and therefore now they just want to know more about it or understand how it works, right? So focusing on voice for us is the priority, because again, lowest common denominator, a good measure of a good pulse taker, for the performance of your other service channels.
And now what you've done is really impressive, starting off from this lean approach and really being able to build iteratively. So if someone's watching this or listening to it later and they would want to do the same thing at their company, do you have any advice for them wanting to start out?
Absolutely. The single biggest advice, and I think it was Dan Miller from Opus Research, I think actually mentioned this the other day, do not ignore the hard lessons from experts, right? Because we certainly ignored a couple and paid the price in the end, right? So, of course we built this virtual agent, and from our own testing, we're like, this is great. It's doing the things we want, like it's working well. Let's just force our customers to go through it, right? Because you have a positive experience. You've tested it, it's working great. You've tested it across, a broad group of people across your organization, and you feel okay, you feel confident in it, right? At the end of the day, again, we're talking about customer experience. We're talking about making it frictionless. No matter how good your bot is, there are people who are not going to want to talk to it. And how do you want to treat those customers, right? So very quickly, you talk about, performance metrics, KPIs that we're monitoring. Well, out of the gate, 30% of people were just hanging up, right? So, and it was big. And so, we looked at why we tried to improve things, but at the end of the day, like looking at calls, there were people who would just call, hear a bot, hang up, call back, and some people would call 10 times in a row and expect a different result, but keep hanging up. And so, eventually, we had to add in the ability for customers to bypass. Like, people would call in, and mash 0, but of course, mashing 0 didn't get you anywhere. It basically got some kind of response from Penny, essentially begging you, please give me a chance, please let me help you. Right? This is for your benefit, not mine. Right? But people don't care. Right? And so the positive news about that, though, was, of course, we were worried, well, if we allow people to skip Penny, we're going to lose all of this value. Like, all of this data that we're getting, all of these, benefits from Penny, they're going to be gone, right? And, I'm happy to say, the moment we added the ability for people to skip Penny, that 30%, hang up, after identifying themselves became 5%, but none of the other proportions of call distribution changed. So the 70% of people who were totally fine going through Penny continued to go through Penny. And so that was a big win for us. And then the next stage, again, it's the same thing. We're like, okay, well, we at least have to identify the caller. Like, that's going to provide so much value. We need to identify the caller. Again, the percentage was a lot smaller. I think it was maybe like 4% of people were hanging up without logging in. But then a different problem happened, right? Suddenly there was an issue with the authentication database. And then what do you do, right? In terms of needing to authenticate the customer. Well, you can't. And so what did you do there? Your customers can't even get through to your call center, right? So trying to force your customers to go through that ideal positive path in your IVR or in your virtual agent, it was pretty much in every single book I've read on bots. Was like, don't do this. Know when you need to escalate to a human. And that is absolutely true.
Nice. That's wicked. What if anything, what would you change about Penny? Would you change anything about Penny?
I mean, all I have is a laundry list of things that I want to do to improve to improve Penny, right? But I would say, like, ideally, I would have been able to have more teams involved in the construction of Penny, and like I definitely involved a lot of people from testing and opinion. So, like, we talk about training data above and beyond like ticketing and call recording and things like that. I set up forums, right, using our internal forum system, being like, hey, like, this is what we're doing. Can you come up with all these different ideas of the way people might describe this stuff? So one of the things that I definitely was self-conscious of throughout the process of building Penny was the shortcomings of the fact that it was just me working on so many parts. So I think, having a more cross-functional team and being involved from, ideation through design all the way to deployment would have been, at least I would have felt better and probably less stressed and worried the day we actually, flipped the switch and went live, that things were going to go well.
Nice. Well, thank you so much for joining us, and apologies for people who, if we haven't managed to get round to your question, then apologies for that. But thank you for all the comments. I don't even know how many comments we've got here. There's been absolutely loads, and if there was any issues with the stream, which I think there might have been, because Chrome crashed twice on me, then apologies for that. But Justin, this has been absolutely immense. I don't think we've had such a deep dive on the podcast for quite some time, Justin, have we?
We've had deep dives, but I think this has been really thorough and on a topic that we haven't gone so thorough on before.
Awesome. I think I got through like 20% of the stuff I prepared to talk about, so that's great.
Well, we'll give you the final thought. For anything in particular that you were wanting to raise that is really important, that you think that people really should be learning from, paying attention to, or things they should consider.
I would say be careful of the Dunning-Kruger effect. I mean, you can Google it, right? It's essentially it's something that I definitely experience. It's a cute little graph that essentially shows, when you're starting to learn something new, how quickly you can, let's say, read a few books and think like, I know what I'm doing. I've suddenly become an expert on this with, very little. Not very little, but like with not really a sufficient amount of experience, to get you there. And so you want to make sure to catch yourself when you're in those moments, and you want to make sure that, you acknowledge that you don't know what you don't know, right? And that's where, for example, your podcast was quite helpful, right? Because above and beyond these books, like, you've got a fantastic ongoing dialogue with a bunch of different guests covering a very wide, array of topics. And so having that frame of reference will help you transition from that, some of the comical versions of the Dunning-Kruger effect, say the peak of Mount Stupid, right? Will help you transition yourself from the peak of Mount Stupid to the platform of sustainability, which is where when you realize that you realize the amount of stuff that you don't know, and you can focus, your attention, picking up the skills, where you need to go and when to defer to experts or when you should look up more information. And you definitely don't want to pull the trigger of going production when you're on the top of Mount Stupid. I absolutely was guilty of doing that. Like, we didn't go production at that point, but I absolutely went to my CTO and my CEO and said, it's ready, right? And then we opened the doors for testing, and it was not. Right. And a lot of that was, not having some of the conversation design bits done right. Some of the things that I already explained, were lessons learned in this call, but it took trial and error to get there, and a fantastic dashboard and visualization system to at least be able to highlight those problems that you need to fix.
Fantastic. What did you say there, Dustin? He's answered Heidi's question in the chat, but it's not showing up.
Yeah, so I was just, Heidi Cohen asked if we will share notes or the key questions or anything like that. And so if you're watching this and you want to go back and re-listen, because we know it is chock full of information, we do post that on VUX.world, the recording, and I believe a summary as well. We've got an email list which you can sign up, and I do believe that we send out an email when that's ready. And if not, at the very least, we'll remind you at some point that we are around, and you can go check the website.
Indeed. And what I've started to do is There's the link if you want to get this on Monday when it's properly published. As Dustin said, it'll be on the site. We do high-level summaries, but also on YouTube we do timestamps as well. So you can just literally, once the video is being processed, you'll be able to just kind of skip through and see the timestamp of all the questions and hop back to whichever bits you find relevant. But if you do want to be notified, then definitely do subscribe to VUX.world/subscribe. Justin, what about yourself? Welcome. Go on, Justin.
No, I was just going to say, Kane, I don't think it's a proper YouTube video unless we point down and say smash that like button, hit subscribe.
Smash that like button, hit subscribe, dudes and dudettes. Do that. And Justin, if people want to follow you online, follow your musings, learn more about what you're up to, where can they go and do that?
Yeah, I mean, if anyone has any questions, feel free to shoot me an email. jrandall at comwave.net, JRANDALL at comwave.net, or follow me on LinkedIn.
Cool. Good. Well, I'll put that on here so people can see it. There it is, jrandall at conwave.net. Do that. Yeah, as I said, this has been absolutely immense. We're getting a lot of good feedback in the chat saying everyone thanks. So yeah, Justin, thank you so much. And before we do go, really briefly, we do have something coming up which is worth mentioning. If you found this conversation at all useful, but you're maybe not at the point of being able to implement something yet, or maybe you are considering something, we are running a workshop in partnership with Cognigy. I'll put the link in the notes here, and that's coming up in a couple of weeks' time. When is it? It is on February the 10th, Wednesday, 10 a.m. PT or 6 p.m. In Europe, and we'll be walking you through some of the basics around setting up your conversational AI strategy and your conversational automation strategy. And so this is all around, making sure you've got your vision set right, making sure you have the appropriate roadmap in place, the right skills, the right resources, how to choose the right technology, and all of that kind of stuff. Covering probably a lot of what we've covered here with Justin as far as the technology is concerned, but a lot more as well around how do you sell it into the business, how do you prove the value, and all of that kind of stuff. So if you are interested, the link I've just put in the chat, and it'll be in the show notes as well. But yeah, before we do wrap up, Justin, very finally, thank you so much for joining us. It's been absolutely immense. Really, really enjoyed it. And we will see everyone next Thursday for a chat with Resemble. Dustin.
Yeah, another Canadian company, 2 Canadians
Awesome.
in a row.
Indeed. Lighting it up. Cool. Nice one.
Awesome.
Well, until next week. Thank you all.
Awesome. Take care.
Cheers, Justin. See you soon.